The message came through the void of space like a dying scream. Ambassador Thelius sat in the communication center of the Galactic Coalition headquarters and listened to the recording for the third time. His long, thin fingers trembled as the desperate voice filled the room. The Lethani colony on Vera 7 was dying. The Lethani were among the most peaceful species in the known galaxy. They had evolved on a small moon where the gravity was gentle and the weather never changed. Their bodies glowed with soft blue light, and they had never known war until now. Marauders from the Outer Rim had found their Mayan colony and surrounded it with 12 warships. "We cannot fight them," the voice in the message said. "We have no weapons. We have no soldiers. They will kill us all if we do not give them everything. Please send help. Please." Thelius closed his eyes. The coalition military was spread across 3 different sectors, dealing with border disputes and pirate attacks. There was no fleet available. No army could reach Vera 7 in time, but there was one option. The humans had joined the coalition only 2 years ago. They were strange creatures from a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. Most species avoided them because their homeworld was classified as a Category 12 death world, the most dangerous classification possible. Thelius had never understood how any intelligent life could evolve on such a planet. Earth had crushing gravity compared to most worlds. Its temperature swung between freezing cold and burning heat. It had massive storms that could destroy entire cities. The oceans were filled with predators. The land was covered with venomous creatures. Even the plants could kill. And yet humans had not only survived, they had become the dominant species on their world. Thelius opened a channel to Earth. He explained the situation. The Lethani needed help. The Marauders would destroy them within days. The human representative listened quietly. Then she smiled. "We have a ship in that sector," she said. "They can be there in 16 hours. Thelius felt relief wash over him. "How many vessels are you sending?" "Just one," the representative said. "But do not worry, Ambassador. The Perseverance will handle it. One ship against 12. Thelius wanted to argue, but the channel closed before he could speak. 16 light years away, Captain David Park stood on the bridge of the USS Perseverance and read the orders on his screen. His face showed no emotion, but his mind was already working through the problem. 12 enemy vessels, 1 colony under siege, 42 crew members under his command. The Perseverance was not a warship. It was a deep space exploration vessel that had been retrofitted with weapons and shields. After humanity joined the coalition, it was fast and tough, but it was never meant to fight a fleet. Lieutenant Commander Grace Kim stood beside him reading the same data. Her dark eyes moved across the tactical information, and her jaw tightened. "They are expecting us to negotiate," she said. "The coalition always negotiates." David nodded slowly. The Marauders would be prepared for diplomats. They would expect threats and bargaining, and eventually a deal that let everyone save face. They would not be prepared for what was coming. "Get me all department heads in the briefing room." David said. "We leave in 1 hour." The crew of the Perseverance gathered around the long table in the center of the ship. Ryan Lay, the communications officer, sat next to Hannah Cole, the chief medical officer. Tommy Reyes, the engineer, was already covered in grease from working on the engines. Marcus Johnson, the head of security, stood against the wall with his arms crossed. Jenny Cho, the weapons specialist, cleaned her fingernails with a small knife. Steve Yang, the tactical officer, pulled up holographic displays of the enemy fleet. David stood at the head of the table and looked at each of them. These were his people. He had served with some of them for 10 years. He trusted them with his life. "The situation is simple," he said. "A peaceful colony is about to be destroyed. We are the only ones who can stop it. The enemy has 12 ships. We have 1. No one spoke. No one needed to. They had all faced bad odds before. They had all survived things that should have killed them. That was what it meant to be human." Tommy spoke first. "I can boost the shields by 30% if I reroute power from the labs and the recreation deck. The engines can Handle a 15% overload for short bursts, but anything more will burn them out. Do it, David said. Jenny pulled up weapon specifications. We have plasma cannons and missile launchers, standard coalition equipment, but I have been making modifications. She smiled in a way that made even Marcus uncomfortable. The Marauders will not enjoy what I have planned. Hannah raised her hand. I reviewed the Lethany biological data. Their species is fragile. David, very fragile, low-gravity world, stable climate. No natural predators. They bruise if you touch them too hard. She paused. They have never seen violence like what we are capable of. Then we keep the violence away from them, David said. We take the fight to the Marauders. They never get close to that. Colony Grace stood and walked to the holographic display. She pointed at the enemy formation. The Marauders are confident. They have no reason to fear a single ship. Their commander is a Drexari warlord named Vorath. He has raided coalition shipping lanes for 20 years. He has never lost. He has never fought humans. Marcus said quietly. Grace nodded. That is our advantage. They do not know what we are. They do not know where we come from. She looked around the table. They think Earth is just another soft world with soft creatures. They have no idea. Brian leaned forward. I have been studying their communication frequencies. I can jam their signals, disrupt their coordination, make them think they are under attack from multiple directions. Good. David said, confusion is our friend. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we do not give them time to think. Steve pulled up a map of the system. There's an asteroid field on the approach to Vera 7. We can use it for cover. Get close before they detect us. David studied the map. He saw the angles, the distances, the timing. In his mind, he was already fighting the battle. He had learned strategy from books and simulations, but also from instinct. Humans had been hunters before they were anything else. That instinct never went away. The Perseverance jumped to hyperspace an hour later. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the ship hurtled through the void toward a battle it was never designed to fight. In his quarters, David sat alone and looked at a photograph. His parents standing in front of their home in California. His sister laughing at something off camera. A blue sky filled with clouds. Earth was a hard world. It killed the weak and tested the strong. It had shaped humanity into something that no other species in the galaxy could understand. The Lethany had called for help. They expected diplomats or soldiers, or perhaps a negotiating team. They were about to meet Deathworlders. David put the photograph away and walked to the bridge. The stars waited for him. The enemy waited for him. And David Park was ready to show the galaxy what humanity could do. The Perseverance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vera system, and the crew held their breath for a moment as the stars returned to their normal positions. Through the viewport, they could see the distant glow of the planet and the dark shapes of enemy ships circling it like vultures. Brian immediately began scanning all frequencies. His fingers danced across the console as he pulled in data from every direction. 12 confirmed vessels, he said. Heavy cruisers, mostly one command ship that is twice the size of the others. They have formed a blockade around the planet. David stood at the center of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. Any response to our arrival? Nod. Yet Brian said, but they see us. The command ship is powering weapons. Open a channel to the colony. David said. The screen flickered, and then a face appeared. It was not a human face. The Lethany, called Quillith, had smooth pale skin that seemed almost transparent beneath the surface. A soft blue light pulsed like a heartbeat. Large dark eyes stared at David with a mixture of hope and confusion. You are the help the Coalition sent? Quillith asked. His voice was high and musical, but it shook with fear. David nodded. I am Captain David Park of the USS Perseverance. We received your distress. Cal Quillith looked past David at the bridge behind him. His bioluminescence flickered rapidly, which Hannah had told them was a sign of distress. One ship. They sent one ship. It is enough, David said. The Lethany administrator did not look convinced. There are 12 of them. Captain, 12 warships with weapons. that could crack our moon in half. We are miners, not soldiers. We have families here. Children. David felt something tighten in his chest. He thought of his own family back on Earth. His sister had 2 kids now, a boy and a girl. He had missed their birthdays for the last 3 years. We will protect your people, David said. I give you my word. They channel closed and Grace stepped forward. They are terrified, she said. They have never seen combat, never experienced violence on this scale. Their entire history is peaceful. Then we make sure they never have to fight. David said, this is our job, not theirs. A new signal came through the communication array. Brian looked at his screen with raised eyebrows. The Marauder command ship is hailing us, Captain. Put them on screen. The face that appeared was nothing like Quillith. The Drexari were massive creatures with thick gray skin and tusks that curved up from their lower jaws. Their eyes were small and cruel, set deep in skulls that looked like they were built for ramming through walls. This one wore armor covered in marks and symbols that probably represented kills or victories. I am Varth. The Drozari growled. His voice was like rocks grinding together. You are the Coalition response. David did not blink. Iambrith laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. One small ship against my fleet. Are the Coalition leaders trying to insult me, or are they simply fools? David kept his voice calm. We are here to ask you to leave this system, release the blockade, and withdraw your forces. No one needs to die today. The Drexari laughed again, and this time other voices joined him from off-screen. His crew found this very funny. I have crushed Coalition forces before. Vareth said, I have burned their stations and taken their ships. Your species is new to the galaxy, human. I have heard stories about your world, stories about monsters and death. But you do not look like monsters to me. You look soft and small and weak. David said nothing. You have one standard cycle, Vareth continued, that is 12 of your hours. Leave this system or I will add your ship to my collection and your skull to my wall. The channel cut-off. Silence filled the bridge for a long moment. Then Tommy spoke up from the engineering station. Did he just threaten to put your skull on his wall? Yes, David said. Tommy nodded. Okay. Just checking. Grace was already working on tactical scenarios. We have 12 hours. That is enough time to prepare. She looked at David. What is the plan? David walked to the holographic display and studied the enemy positions. The Marauders were spread out to cover all approaches to the planet. Their formation was designed to intimidate and to prevent escape. It was not designed for defense. They think we will run, David said, or negotiate. They expect us to be afraid. He traced a path through the asteroid field on the display. We will use the asteroids for cover. They're close to their supply ship here. He pointed to one of the smaller vessels. It is separated from the main fleet by almost 1,000 kilometers. A boarding action. Grace said. David nodded. They will not expect it. The Coalition does not board ships. They fight at range with missiles and energy weapons. He smiled slightly. We are not the Coalition. Marcus pushed off from the wall where he had been leaning. I want to lead the boarding team. David looked at him. Marcus Johnson was built like a wall of muscle. He had grown up in Detroit, in a neighborhood where you learned to fight before you learned to read. He had served in 3 different military branches before joining the space program. There was no one David trusted more in a close combat situation. Take Jenny and 4 others, David said, fast and quiet. Disable their engines and communication array. Then get out. Marcus nodded. What about prisoners? If they surrender, let them live. David said, if they fight, show them what Earth soldiers can do. The Perseverance moved through the asteroid field like a shadow. Tommy had reduced their energy signature to almost nothing. They drifted between massive rocks of iron and ice, using the debris as cover on the lower deck. Marcus and his team prepared for the assault. They wore light armor designed for mobility, not heavy protection. In their hands, they carried weapons that mixed human technology with Coalition designs. Jenny had made personal modifications to each one. You know, she said, as she checked her rifle. The Drexari think they are the toughest species in the sector. Marcus loaded a magazine into his sidearm. They have not met us yet. Brian monitored the enemy communications from the bridge. Their supply ship is running on minimal crew, he reported. They think they are safe behind the fleet. They are wrong. Grace said. The Perseverance slipped through the asteroid field and came up behind the supply ship like a ghost. The Marauders did not see them until it was too late. David watched the airlock indicators on his console. Green lights showed that Marcus and his team had made entry. Show them what Deathworlders can do, David said quietly. Show them why the galaxy should have been afraid. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Marcus Johnson stepped into the enemy ship. The corridor was dark and smelled like metal and something else. Something organic that Marcus did not want to think about too hard. The Drexari were not known for cleanliness. They were known for violence and cruelty and leaving nothing alive in their wake. Jenny moved beside him, her rifle raised and ready. 4 other crew members followed close behind. They moved in perfect silence, communicating with hand signals that they had practiced 1,000 times. The supply ship was old and poorly maintained. Pipes leaked overhead, and the lights flickered every few seconds. It was the kind of vessel that the Marauders used to carry food and ammunition and prisoners. The crew would be minimal, but they would be armed. Marcus held up his fist and everyone stopped. He could hear footsteps ahead. Heavy boots on metal grating. 2 sets, maybe 3. He pointed at Jenny and then at a side corridor. She nodded and disappeared. Into the shadows, Marcus pressed himself against the wall and waited. The Marauders came around the corner. They were smaller than Vorath, but still massive by human standards. Each one carried a plasma pistol and wore light armor covered in scratches and dents from past battles. They were talking to each other in their guttural language, laughing about something. They stopped laughing when Marcus stepped out in front of them. The first one barely had time to raise his weapon before Marcus closed the distance. His fist connected with the Marauder's throat, and he felt cartilage crunch under his knuckles. The alien dropped his gun and grabbed at his neck, choking. The second Marauder tried to aim, but Marcus was already moving. He grabbed the pistol and twisted it out of the creature's grip while driving his elbow into its face. Both Marauders were on the ground in less than 3 seconds. Jenny emerged from the side corridor with her team. Another one came from behind. She said, "Taken care of." Marcus looked down at the unconscious aliens. They would have nightmares about this for the rest of their lives. Good. The team moved deeper into the ship on the Perseverance. David watched the progress through helmet cameras that transmitted back to the bridge. He could see everything his team saw: the dark corridors, the surprised faces of the enemy, the quick and brutal efficiency of human close combat, the coalition fights at range. Grace said quietly, watching beside him, "They use ships and missiles and energy beams. They have never seen this because they have never needed to." David said, "Their worlds are safe. Their species evolved in peace." He thought about Earth, about the millions of years of evolution that had shaped humanity into predators, into survivors, into something that the galaxy had never encountered before. Brian suddenly sat up straight. "Captain, I am picking up communications from the Marauder fleet. They know something is wrong." Already, David asked. The supply ship missed a check, and Brian said they are sending a patrol to investigate 2 vessels breaking formation. Now David made a decision quickly. "Tell Marcus to hurry. We need to be gone before those ships arrive." On the supply ship, Marcus received the message and picked up the pace. They reached the engine room in 2 minutes. The door was locked, but Tommy had given them override codes taken from Coalition databases inside. 3 engineers worked on the massive power core. They looked up in surprise as the humans entered. "Nobody move," Jenny said. A rifle was aimed at the center of the room. One of the engineers reached for an alarm panel. Marcus shot him in the arm. The engineer screamed and fell back. The other 2 raised their hands immediately. "Smart choice," Marcus said. "Move away from the consoles." The humans worked fast. They planted explosive charges on the engine core, and the communication array. The charges were small but powerful, enough to disable the ship without destroying it completely. They were not here to kill everyone. They were here to send a message. Marcus opened a channel back to the Perseverance, charges said. "We are heading back to extraction. Good work." David said, "Get out of there." Now the team moved back through the corridors. They passed the bodies of marauders they had encountered on the way in. Some were unconscious. Some were dead. They had not started the violence, but they had finished it. The airlock sealed behind them, and the Perseverance detached from the supply ship just as the charges detonated. The explosions ripped through the engine room and the communication array. The supply ship went dark and began to drift on. The Marauder command ship Vareth received the report. His small eyes narrowed with rage. "What do you mean disabled?" "The supply ship is not responding, sir," one of his officers said. "We sent a patrol, but by the time they arrived, the enemy vessel was gone. Our engineers and crew are alive, but the ship is dead in space." Vareth slammed his fist on the arm of his command chair. The metal bent under the impact. "How did they get past our sensors?" "We do not know," the officer said. "They moved through the asteroid field. We never detected them until they were already docking." Vareth stood, his massive frame cast a shadow across the entire bridge. "These humans," he growled the word like a curse. "They think they are clever. They think they can play games with us. What are your orders?" Vareth bared his tusks. "We hunt them down, we find their little ship, and we tear it apart piece by piece." He turned to the viewport where the distant shape of the colony glowed. "And then we burn that colony to ash." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the cargo, the minerals." Vareth turned and grabbed the officer by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "I do not care about minerals anymore. I care about making an example." He threw the officer across the bridge. "Find that human ship." Now on the Perseverance, David listened to the intercepted communications. Brian had broken the Marauder encryption an hour ago. They could hear everything. "He is angry," Grace said. "Good," David said. "Angry enemies make mistakes." Hannah looked up from her medical station. "Captain, I have been monitoring the crew vitals. Everyone is fine. Minor injuries only." She paused. "Marcus has elevated adrenaline levels, but that is normal for combat situations." David nodded. His people had done well. The first strike was successful. Now came the hard part. Steve pulled up tactical data on the main screen. "The Marauders are leaving their patrol formation. They are searching for us in the asteroid field. They will not find us." David said, "We are going to find them." He looked around the bridge at his crew. They were tired. They were operating on caffeine and determination. But they were ready. The Lethani had called for help. They expected diplomats or negotiators. They expected someone to talk to the Marauders and make a deal. Instead, they got humans. Deathworlders from a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years, and humans did not negotiate with bullies. They did not make deals with those who threatened the innocent. They fought. And they won. David pointed at the screen. "Target their communications relay. If we can isolate their ships, they cannot coordinate." Steve nodded. "Working on it." Captain Hunt was on. The Perseverance moved through the debris field like a predator stalking prey. Tommy had pushed the engines to their limit, and the ship responded with a low hum that vibrated through every deck. They were running hot, burning fuel faster than regulations allowed. But regulations did not matter when lives were at stake. David stood at the center of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. 3 Marauder vessels had broken away from the main fleet to search for them. They were spreading out, trying to cover more area. That was their mistake. "Isolated ships are vulnerable ships," Grace said. She had the same thought as David. Steve highlighted the closest target on the display. "This one is moving toward the outer edge of the asteroid field. If we loop around, we can catch it from behind." "Do it," David said. The Perseverance changed course. Its hull scraped against a spinning rock and sparks flew across the viewport, but Tommy kept them steady. The ship twisted through gaps that should have been too narrow and emerged behind the Marauder vessel like a ghost. Brian sent a jamming signal. David said, I do not want them calling for help done. Brian said. His fingers flew across the console. That ship is blind and deaf fire, David said. Jenny had been waiting for this moment. The plasma cannons roared and streams of superheated energy slammed into the Marauder ship. The enemy shields flickered and died under the assault. Their engines exploded in a burst of orange flame. The vessel began to drift powerless and crippled one down. Grace said he. 11 to go, Steve added, but the Marauders were adapting. The other two search vessels detected the weapons fire and changed course. They were converging on the Perseverance position. Tommy, get us out of here, David said. Working on it, Captain, Tommy said. The engines whined with effort as he pushed them even harder. The ship lurched forward and dove into another cluster of asteroids. The Marauders followed. They were faster in open space, but the humans knew how to use the terrain. David had grown up hiking in mountains and forests. He understood cover and concealment. He understood how to use the environment as a weapon. We cannot run forever. Grace said. They will call for reinforcements. No, David said. We need to end this quickly. He studied the tactical display and saw an opportunity. The two pursuing vessels were close together. Too close. If he could force them into a collision, or even just close enough to interfere with each other. Tommy, I need you to do something impossible, David said. Tommy laughed. Is there any other kind? David explained his plan. The engineer listened and then nodded. It might work, but the gravitational forces could tear us apart. David looked at his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. They had not come this far to fail do it. David said. The Perseverance suddenly reversed course. It turned and flew directly at the pursuing Marauders. The enemy ships hesitated, clearly confused. No prey had ever charged at them before Tommy activated the gravitational wake. The Perseverance was not a large ship, but it had a powerful core, and Tommy knew how to manipulate the forces around it. He created a ripple in space that spread outward like a wave in water. The Marauder ships were caught in the wave. They tried to compensate, but their pilots were not prepared. Their vessels lurched and crashed into each other. Shields failed and hulls breached. The two ships tumbled away, locked together in a deadly embrace. 3 down, Grace said. Her voice held a note of amazement. The Perseverance did not escape unharmed. The strain of the maneuver tore through the hull. An alarm screamed across the bridge. Hull breach on deck 4. Brian reported. Deck 7 is venting. Atmosphere seal those sections. David ordered. Already done, Tommy said. But Captain, we cannot take many more hits like that. David knew. He also knew they had no choice. On the colony, Administrator Quillith watched the battle through long-range sensors. His bioluminescence pulsed with confusion and fear. He had never seen anything like this. The humans were fighting like nothing he had ever witnessed in his long life. They were aggressive and unpredictable. They took risks that seemed insane, and they were winning. How Quillith whispered, "How can one ship do this?" One of his aides stood beside him, trembling. The humans, she said, I read about their world before they arrived. It is classified as a death world. Quillith had heard the term but never understood what it meant. Now he was beginning to understand. Their planet tries to kill them, the aide continued. Every day of their lives they fight to survive. Their gravity is crushing. Their weather is violent. Their oceans are filled with predators. She paused. They evolved to be survivors, Captain, because on Earth only the strong survive. Quillith watched as the human ship disappeared back into the asteroid field. The Marauders were regrouping, but they were scared. He could tell by their movements. They had expected easy prey. They had found something else entirely on the Marauder command ship. Vareth received reports of the losses. His rage had transformed into something colder, something that might have been called fear in a lesser creature. 3 ships, he growled. How did they destroy 3 ships? The human vessel is unlike anything we have faced, an officer said. They do not fight like coalition forces. They fight like. They hesitated, like what Vareth demanded, like predators, the officer said. like they were born to hunt. Wrath stared at the tactical display. The single human ship was still out there, still hunting, still waiting. He had underestimated them. He would not make that mistake again. All ships, Varus said, converge on the asteroid field, full power to weapons. We end this now. On the Perseverance, Hannah worked in the medical bay. 2 crew members lay on beds with injuries from the hull breaches. One had a broken arm. The other had burns across her shoulder. Neither complained. They just waited for treatment so they could return to their stations. You should rest, Hannah said. The woman with the burns shook her head. We are not done yet, Doc. Hannah cleaned and bandaged the wound. She had seen worse during her residency on Earth. She had worked in emergency rooms where gunshot victims and car crash survivors came through every night. She had learned to work fast and stay calmed. Door opened and David stepped in. How are they? They will live, Hannah said. She looked at him and saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of command pressing down on him. How are you? David did not answer. He just looked at the injured crew members. They trust me, he said finally. They followed me into a battle we should not be able to win, and we are winning, Hannah said. Because of you. David shook his head. Because of all of us. Every person on this ship. He turned to leave, then stopped. We are going to finish this. I promise. Hannah believed him. Back on the bridge, David took his position. The Marauder fleet was converging, 9 ships against 1. The final confrontation was coming. Status report, David said. Shields at 60%, Tommy reported. Weapons at full power. Engines are holding, but it would not push them much. Arthur Bryan looked up from his console. Captain, I am receiving a transmission from the colony. It is Administrator Quillith put it through. David said. Quillith appeared on screen. His bioluminescence was steady, now no longer flickering with fear. Captain Park, I do not understand what I am seeing, but I want you to know something. Whatever happens, my people will never forget what you have done for us. David nodded. We are not done yet. Administrator, stay safe. We will protect you. Channel close grace. Step forward, David. The odds are not good. 9 ships with full weapons against us. David looked at her. Then he looked at his crew. They were scared and tired and hurt, but they were still standing, still fighting, still ready. I know the odds, he said. But we are human. We do not surrender. We do not give up. He turned back to the viewport, where the Marauder fleet was visible as distant lights. We show them what Deathworlders can do. The final battle was about to begin. The Marauder fleet came out of the asteroid field in formation, 9 ships with weapons hot and shields at full power. Vorath sat on his command throne and stared at the viewport where the small human vessel waited. He had lost 3 ships to these creatures. 3 ships to a single enemy. That had never happened before in his entire career as a warlord. No more games, he growled. Destroy them. The Marauder ships opened fire. A wall of plasma and missiles streaked across space toward the Perseverance. The human ship should have been vaporized in the first volley, but it was not there. Tommy had anticipated the attack. He had already moved the ship, diving beneath the line of fire and coming up behind a massive asteroid. The weapons struck rock instead of metal, and the asteroid exploded into a cloud of debris. Perseverance burst through the debris field and opened fire. Jenny targeted the lead Marauder vessel, hitting its engines with precision shots. The ship veered off course and crashed into its neighbor. Both vessels tumbled away, locked in a spiral of destruction. 5 down, Grace called out. Marauders adjusted their formation, spreading out to avoid more collisions. But that made them vulnerable individually. David saw the opportunity. Bryan jammed their communications. David ordered, I want each ship isolated. Done. Bryan said, but Captain, they are learning. They are switching frequencies. Then jam those too. David said, whatever it takes. The battle became chaos. The Perseverance wove between enemy ships, using its smaller size and greater agility to avoid the heavy weapons that could destroy it. Jenny landed shot after shot, targeting engines and weapon systems rather than trying to destroy entire vessels. But the Marauders were fighting back. A plasma bolt struck the Perseverance shields, and the ship shuddered. Alarms screamed across every console. Shields at 30%, Tommy shouted. We cannot take many more hits. Another blast rocked the ship, and the lights flickered hull breaches. On decks 2 and 3, fires in the engineering section. David gripped the arms of his chair. They were losing. They had fought harder than anyone could have expected, but the numbers were against them, Captain. Grace said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos. Maybe we should retreat, regroup. David looked at her. Then he looked at the viewport where the Lethani colony glowed in the distance. Millions of innocent lives. Families, children. Beings who had never known war and never wanted Tono, he said. We finished this. He opened a channel to the entire crew. All hands, this is the captain. We are going to board the enemy flagship. I need volunteers for the assault team. The responses came immediately. Every able-bodied crew member volunteered. Marcus was already heading to the armory with Jenny and a dozen others. David turned to Tommy. Can you get us close to Varth's ship? Tommy grinned. It will destroy the engines. But yes, I can get us there. Then do it, David said. He looked at Grace. You have the bridge. Grace nodded. Come back alive. Captain David headed for the airlock. The Perseverance screamed across the battlefield. Its engines burned with everything they had left. Tommy pushed the ship through gaps that should have been impossible dodging. Weapons, fire, and debris. The Marauders tried to stop them, but they were too slow, too predictable. The human ship slammed into the side of Varth's command vessel. The impact tore through both holes and the airlock sealed automatically. Marcus led the boarding team through the breach. The corridors of the Marauder flagship were wide and dark, built for creatures twice the size of humans. The Drexari defenders came at them with weapons and fists and tusks. They were not prepared for what they faced. Marcus fought like a machine. His fists broke bones, and his rifle never missed. Jenny moved beside him, covering angles and taking down enemies before they could flank the team. The other crew members fought with the same ferocity, the same determination. They had trained for this on Earth, in gyms and dojos and military bases. They had learned to fight in every condition, in every environment, against every kind of opponent. The Drexari were strong, but they were not smarter. They were not faster. They were not humans. David led a second team toward the bridge. They encountered resistance at every turn. Marauders who had never faced boarding actions, who had never seen enemies fight at close range. They fell one by one. Bridge door was reinforced, but Jenny had brought explosives. She planted the charges, and everyone took cover. The explosion tore the door apart. Varth stood in the center of the bridge, surrounded by his officers. He was enormous, even for a Drexari. His armor was covered in trophies from 100 battles. His tusks were stained with old blood. He looked at the humans who had invaded his ship. These small, soft creatures who had destroyed half his fleet and boarded his command vessel. He should have been angry. Instead, he felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear you, the Drexari said to David. You are their leader. David stepped forward. I am Captain David Park of the USS Perseverance. I am here to accept your surrender. Varth laughed, but there was no humor in it. You expect me to surrender to you? I am not asking, David said. For a long moment, the two leaders stared at each other. The Drexari towered over the human by more than 2 feet. He outweighed him by hundreds of pounds. He had killed more enemies than David had ever faced, but David did not blink. He did not step back. He stood his ground because that was what humans did. Varth saw something in the human's eyes. Something that made him understand why his fleet had failed. These creatures did not know fear the way other species did. They had faced worse than Marauders. They had survived a world that should have killed them every single day. You are from a death world. Varth said. David nodded. The Drexari lowered his head. We surrender the remaining Marauder ships. Receive the transmission from their flagship. Stand down, retreat. The battle is over. The Perseverance floated in space, its engines dead, its hull breached in a dozen places, but it had survived, and more importantly, the colony had survived. Administrator Quillith watched the Marauders withdraw, and felt his bioluminescence pulse with something he had never experienced before. Up on the bridge of the command ship, David accepted Varath's formal surrender. The Marauder warlord would face coalition justice. For his crimes, his surviving ships would be escorted out of the system at his over grace said. Her voice was exhausted but triumphant. David looked out the viewport at the Lithani colony, the soft blue glow of a peaceful world that had been saved by violence they could never understand. Yes, it is over, and the days that followed the stories spread across the galaxy. A single human ship had defeated a Marauder fleet, 12 vessels against one, and the humans had won Ambassador Thelius Reed. The reports and finally understood why Earth had been classified as a death world. These creatures had evolved in an environment of constant danger, predators and disease and natural disasters. They had become something unique, something the galaxy had never seen. The Coalition requested a meeting with Earth representatives. They wanted to discuss humanity's role in the galactic community. Perhaps humans could help protect other vulnerable species. Perhaps they could serve as a deterrent against future aggression on the Perseverance. Repairs had begun. The ship would fly again. The crew would heal. Medals and honors would come. But none of that mattered to David. What mattered was that they had done what they came to do. They had protected the innocent. They had shown the galaxy what Deathworlders could accomplish. Grace found him in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The Lithani are calling us heroes, she said. David shook his head. We are not heroes. We are just human. Grace smiled. Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe it was the galaxy had expected assistance. They had expected diplomats or soldiers or negotiators. They had expected creatures who would talk and bargain and eventually retreat instead. They got humans, they got Deathworlders. And the galaxy would never forget it.